We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? Take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset. Some people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen. The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
In 1996, the UN said they would use food as a weapon. And now they've told us they're going to ban humans eating meat. But how are they going to do it? We've now discovered that many modern vaccines and the Moderna and Pfizer shots have a bovine protein in them that then creates an autoimmune response in those that take the shot so that many of them can no longer eat beef. Ladies and gentlemen, it's in the literature, it's in the documents. The plan to poison the food supply isn't coming. It's here by poisoning us to where we're allergic to beef. And that's just the start. This is the total weaponization of the food supply. This is how the globalists are making their move. Okay, last week I did a special report that was part one of getting into the fact that the globalists, from all the research and all the evidence we have, are preparing to attack the food supply. They're already doing it with GMO. They're already doing it with glyphosate. They're already doing it with so many things. And this is very similar to what happened with glyphosate. We'll talk about that in a moment. But now they're all over BBC and Associated Press and USA Today saying the next pandemic will come through the food supply. And it's not safe, and we need the UN regulators to take control. You see them shutting down farms in the Netherlands, shutting down farms in Ireland, shutting down farms in areas of Asia, causing massive upheaval, social unrest, and starvation, an angrier world that Klaus Schwab talked about. So this is part two. We're going to do part 3, part 4, part 5, at least 6 parts on this, and we're planning to make a documentary about the enemy's next attack plan. And it's going to be bigger than just attacking the food supply, but that's going to be a big part of the film that is now in production. But this info is too powerful and too important. We've got to get it out now. So there's a tick called the Lone Star tick that's in many parts of the United States. And the Lone Star tick has a protein crystal in it that if it bites you, can begin to replicate in your body, and your body will then have an autoimmune response to that protein, so that if you ever experience that protein again in any other type of meat, you will then feel absolutely terrible and have an autoimmune response. Like if you've been stung by a bee, and then you get an allergy to it, the next time it could make you really sick, could even kill you. So here's the information we are about to break down. This is beyond critical. So they're hyping up, we need to get rid of beef. They're hyping up, you will soon eat the bugs. They are saying we've got to stop producing beef because of methane and all these lies. You know, the sea levels are going to rise and kill us all, like they've been saying for decades. That didn't happen. And then they come out and say, because of this tick, it turns out a large part of the population is suddenly not going to be able to eat beef anymore, particularly because of this chemical that it puts in you, or this prion crystal. Very similar to mad cow disease, you remember, that showed up in England. They had to kill millions of cows and sheep and all the rest of it. Most of them didn't even have it. It came from feeding rotten meat to cows and sheep. They were supposed to eat meat. Remember, they were taking dead animals, even dead pets, and grinding them up with wheat and corn and turning it into what they call a goo or an ooze, literally, and feeding it to them. Then the crystals would begin to grow in the guts, because the guts aren't designed to eat meat, and go through the gut wall into the brain, and then it would grow the crystals inside of the brain. So I'm going to go over here to the desk with Rob Dew that's with me, because he's done even more research on this than I have. We're going to go over just this one big piece of the puzzle, because guess what? The tick that bites you, it puts the same protein in you that they admit is in many of the so-called vaccines. And the CDC even admits that it could be the vaccines that are giving this to people. Kind of like Reuters and AP admit most polio cases are from Bill Gates and the UN vaccine. Just like you think glyphosate's a problem, this is much worse. But remember, they first only sprayed Roundup or glyphosate on corn crops and on soybeans when they were growing to kill weeds. But usually early on, so the corn could get going or the soybeans could get going. One application. Then they learned they could spray it on the wheat when it was becoming ripe or ready for harvest, in the late summer, early fall, because they would lose a lot of the wheat because of fungal growth. Well, it turns out that if you spray glyphosate, it also kills fungus, but it was soaking on the wheat. And as soon as that got approved in the early 2000s, that's when you saw the massive, quote, gluten intolerancy exploding. People never had it because what you're intolerant to is glyphosate that will literally kill you long term, grow cancers, you name it. So this is the same thing where it's in the shots, it's in the vaccines they're giving the cows. Particularly, it starts growing in them. You eat them, you get sick. And see, now people can't eat beef anymore, just like we saw wheat sales get cut in half the last 15, 16, 17 years. And I just suddenly can't eat gluten. That's not the gluten, folks. It's you have a Roundup allergy because it's a poison. So we're going to go over to the desk right here. I'm going to show you this in part 2, then part 3, part 4, part 5, at least 6 parts just on this because they tell you imminently you're not going to eat beef or other meats anymore. And they're the ones running the whole system. So we're going to break this down. Stay with us. Rob, we really know what they're about to do. They always pre-plan. They always pre-program. Let's go over this research.
Yeah, so we got the Mayo Clinic here, just talking about alpha-gal syndrome. It's a food allergy that makes people allergic to red meat and other products from mammals. So anything about a mammal, that would be goat, that would be pig, anything like that, you're going to become allergic to it. Now, here's
one of the cow identifies as a duck. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And they're saying here, of course, it's just the Lone Star tick, nothing else. But here, these products may contain alpha-gal. So, of course, they talk about meats. But
that's from the CDC.
And this is a CDC document right here. You flip this over. Non-food products that contain alpha-gal. Oh, vaccines. Oh, okay. And it's an additive, a stabilizer, or a coating. And it said it could be in the gelatin, in the glycerin, magnesium stearate, or bovine extract. Bovine extract is what you get when you basically take a fetal cow and grind it up and turn it into a medium that this stuff grows on. So it could also be from other
they used to grow it on dead babies. Now they grow it on dead cows.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't do well. They still put some, but yeah. But then you go to the link here. There's a link right here. You go to that. Here's the link that shows all the vaccines that could potentially have this. And I just highlighted the ones with bovine serum in it. So the DTaP vaccine is one. Hepatitis A, MMR.
Yeah, it has similar lipid particles that grow protein.
Right. Different MMRs, the rotavirus.
So they're obsessed with colonizing us with proteins.
Exactly.
And then they can add to the protein, the type of protein it is, to cause an allergic response. Kind of like the UN got caught adding a hormone in second trimester pregnancies to tetanus shots to create spontaneous miscarriages.
Exactly. So you have all these different vaccines that have the different products that they mentioned in here: gelatin, glycerin, bovine extract, magnesium stearate. Now here's an interesting article here.
And again, the tick puts the same protein in you.
Anaphylaxis after zoster vaccine, that's your shingles vaccine, implicating alpha-gal allergy as possible mechanism. Now, what's one of the things you do get from the COVID vaccine, a side effect, is herpes zoster virus, which is also known as shingles. So right there, here's a connection from PubMed. This is right there on their website, anaphylaxis after zoster vaccine, implicating alpha-gal allergy as possible mechanism. So somehow the alpha-gal is getting into the vaccines. Of course, they're doing it on purpose. Then it's getting into your body, and then all of a sudden you have an allergy to red meat.
And that's how we're going to be taught to eat the bugs. We warned you 9 years ago with Dr. Edward Gribb about mRNA shots now that were coming. We predicted everything that happened 3.5 years ago. We told you what would unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, they are pre-programming everybody ready, everybody prepared that you're not going to be able to eat meat anymore. And already I know a bunch of people who can't eat red meat now that have this allergy, and they weren't bitten by a tick, but they have been taking the, quote, modern vaccines. So they don't want you eating meat. They give you a very serious allergy, and they can do this right down the line. They don't want you to have a baby. You take the tetanus shot. The UN got caught doing it on record in the mid-90s in Africa. They add the hormone that the mother releases at the start of the second trimester. The body then creates an autoimmune response to that, attacks the baby. 100% of the time, spontaneous miscarriage.
The genetic editing of plants to contain edible vaccines is well underway. Work is being done with bananas, potatoes, tomatoes, lettuce, rice, wheat, soybeans, and corn. Companies like Medicago are using gene editing to turn plants into mini bioreactors.
Medicago's manufacturing facility looks like a nursery, but inside these plants, they're growing a new kind of vaccine. The technology is called a virus-like particle.
At Medicago, we use a careful step-by-step process to develop vaccines, using our plants as mini bioreactors. We start with the gene sequence, or code of a virus. We then use our technology to synthesize the virus code into a real biological product. The code contains genetic instructions that our plants can read, and we insert it into bacteria called Agrobacterium tumefaciens. We submerge the plants in a bath with the bacteria that carries the information into the plant cells. And using a vacuum, we suck out the air between the plant cells and replace it with the liquid. The plants absorb it like a sponge. At the end of their bacterial bath, we return our plants to a carefully controlled greenhouse to let them get on with their natural growing business for at least 4 days. Now the plants will start producing the most important ingredient of our vaccines, virus-like particles.
Gene editing is now officially in our meat industry. Lobbyists for the cattlemen and pork associations in several states have confirmed that they will be using the mRNA COVID vaccines on their livestock. Attorney Tom Renz has been warning that there is no law requiring anyone to give informed consent for vaccine food. There are no laws requiring anyone to tell you the food you are buying has been vaxxed with the spike protein clot shot. The UK recently passed into law the Genetic Technology Precision Breeding Bill. The bill amends the Environmental Protection Act of 1990 to exclude references to precision-bred organisms so far as they relate to marketing. Precision-bred organism is another term for gene-edited. So now in the UK, food that's been gene-edited can be legally marketed as non-GMO. And if this UK gene-edited meat makes its way to America, it can be labeled non-GMO here as well. And so long as it's butchered in America, it can be labeled product of USA. The fake alternative meat being pushed by Bill Gates and others is made of immortal cell lines. In other words, cancerous tumor cells. Real meat is being blamed for climate change. And a recent independent study suggests that most of our meat is already contaminated. Using infrared spectroscopy and electron microscopy, Dr. Anna Maria Mielcia has been studying the blood of the vaxxed and the unvaxxed for over a year now. And at first, she was finding the same contamination in only the blood of the vaxxed, a contamination that she describes as ribbon-like structures, much like the mysterious blood clots being found by coroners. But lately she's been finding these ribbon-like structures in the blood of the unvaxxed as well. By measuring the frequency of one of these mysterious rubbery blood clots, Dr. David Jenigan has developed a way of detecting the same frequency in the vaxxed. Recently, he's found this unique frequency in the meat being sold in his local grocery store, and asked Dr. Mielcia to confirm his findings. Her microscopy showed that the blood samples taken from products in the grocery store were all contaminated with the similar ribbon-like structures found in the blood of the vaxxed. Most of the meat in the grocery store is from overseas, and if we want to eat uncontaminated meat, we'll have to start buying direct from farms in America that still produce all-natural organic protein and take back control of.
We are being told that we must stop eating beef because the methane produced by cattle burps and farts is accelerating global warming. So let's look at the science. Mass balance calculations take into account material being added, exchanged, and lost during natural processes. And Australian geologist Ian Plimer breaks down this science in Eat Beef, Save the Planet. Grass, along with most plant life, consumes carbon dioxide from the air as food. The more CO2, the greener the environment. So the theory that CO2 levels are hurting the environment is flawed from the start. But for the sake of argument, we can examine the science and see if cow farts actually are increasing CO2 levels in the atmosphere. The grass consumes CO2 from the air, and when it dies, methane is released, which quickly separates into CO2 and water vapor. When the grass is eaten by cattle, this carbon is recycled in various ways. Cattle waste fertilizes the grass with some of this carbon, and the rest is stored in meat, milk, blood, intestines, bones, and skin. Thanks to the cattle, carbon is taken from the grass and used as fertilizer, stored in leather goods, and consumed as food, where most of it stays with the body until death. And so the processes of meat production and consumption actually removes carbon from the atmosphere and recycles it elsewhere. Humans, cattle, and grass are all parts of the same natural ecosystem, and carbon is the building block. The entire anti-meat agenda is built upon lies. Grass-fed beef is so nutritious that an all-beef diet has become a very popular choice for people cleansing and healing from several ailments and disease. Humans are omnivores, and that means we have the ability to survive on both plants and animals. Our teeth are able to cut and masticate animal flesh, and we have the digestive enzyme trypsin for breaking down meat, which has allowed the human brain to grow larger over time, allows us to grow stronger, and operate more efficiently. Many people eat vegetarian diets because they believe that eating meat is immoral. This argument is taught like a religion, with the main rule being, don't eat anything with a face, which doesn't make any sense. What about the millions of microorganisms we consume in a single glass of water? Do they not deserve the same respect? Experiments with plants and vegetables show how they feel pain and recognize the person who hurt them. Do they not deserve the same respect simply because they have no face? A simple law of the physical natural world is that life is sustained by life. Every living thing sustains its own life by consuming other living things. This is true of the carnivore, the omnivore, and the vegan. The moral argument of veganism is just another ego trip. Many are learning veganism from modern yoga teachers, as if it were an ancient religion. But this is a myth. The cow was sacred in traditional yoga because it sustained life. Vegetarianism was only promoted among the lower castes so that enough meat was available to the warrior and priest classes. And that's all that's happening today. The all-powerful 0.1% want us lower castes to eat bugs while they save the best for themselves. But it's even worse than that. They want us all to get sick and die. In an evaluation of edible insects and the transmission of parasitic diseases, 1/3 of all insects studied were found to be pathogenic to humans. And most insects contain chitin, which is a modified polysaccharide present in most insects and absent in all mammals. We cannot digest it, and it is known to cause several health issues with humans who consume it, including respiratory issues and the accelerated growth of cancer cells. The real problem isn't beef consumption, it's factory farming, and we can solve this by incentivizing local grass-fed cattle farming.
During the 1990s, Monsanto Corporation's devastating attack against farmers, their genetically modified frankenfoods, and their neurotoxic pesticides inspired people to push government into legislating certification standards for foods. But thanks to Big Pharma, Bill Gates, and pop culture media brainwashing, Monsanto still stands strong and is ready to take complete control of your food supply. With the help of the same powerful families and foundations who already control the money and the energy. Their plans to do so are comprehensively laid out in a recent report published at Corey Diggs. The indoor vertical farming industry, which is a highly innovative and efficient method, is being funded by Bill Gates and pushed by the World Economic Forum as a replacement to conventional outdoor farming. AeroFarms is the industry leader in vertical farming, and they also co-developed the first CRISPR gene-edited produce product and worked with the NIH to produce proteins for the deadly COVID vaccines.
AeroFarms makes it clear that they are not conventional gardeners. They are all about synthetic food products, which is clearly the trend in this growing industry. Monsanto is creating specially tailored genetically cut seeds for these vertical farms. And the University of California is developing a plant-based mRNA vaccine that farms can grow in heads of lettuce, which happens to be the main crop of these new farms. These GMO farms already provide food at major outlets including Kroger, Walmart, and Whole Foods, and are massively expanding. And it's not only fresh produce that's getting genetically modified. The USDA and FDA have already approved genetic modifications on pigs, salmon, and cattle, and they have approved synthetic lab-grown meat. Bill Gates' Good Food Institute plans to reimagine meat production with $10 million of support from the USDA. But in order to make their big pharma food supply the new American model, they will need a major crisis. The 2020 lockdowns distressed the supply chain, which was further affected by U.S. sanctions against Russia. This has created a food shortage crisis. Add to that, over a dozen food processing plants have mysteriously been destroyed in the past several weeks, as well as major fertilizer plants during a major fertilizer crisis. To make matters worse, Union Pacific Railroad forces a 20% reduction in shipments from the world's largest fertilizer company. And when the people demand a solution, as it turns out, Bill Gates is heavily invested in alternative fertilizers and is also a chief stockholder of the Canadian National Railway, who claims to be helping the fertilizer market grow. Perhaps Bill Gates and Monsanto will volunteer to save everyone with their new gene-edited bacteria fertilizer. And maybe it will backfire like it did in Africa, when after 15 years of trying to help, all Gates and Monsanto accomplished was increasing starvation by 31%. But that's okay, because it's Monsanto Bayer to the rescue with their big pharma food factories, with brand new mRNA vaccine lettuce. And as if this wasn't bad enough, the stated goal of this new Franken-food industry is to make all food traceable, and that means coating it all in nanotech. Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls money can control the world.
The young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, half of this government, are actually young nobles of the world creator. We penetrate the cabinets. The change is not just happening. The change can be shaped by us. We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? Take the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset. So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.